Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Our Experts podcast. I'm Carol Matichka, your host, an eternal advocate for pharmacy, really trying to bring you as many interesting perspectives as I can in the realm of pharmacy and all topics surrounding pharmacy. And today is no exception. We have with us, I'm very excited today to have Samantha Alexander. She is the CEO and co-founder of bitewell, which is, and I quote, a nutrition intelligence company on a mission to improve the world's health through food. So certainly in the pharmacy world, we as pharmacists understand medications and understand how important they are to a patient's health. And I really thought it would be great to bring on her perspective in regards to food and how food impacts health. I think all of us understand that if we can help patients through their diet, we can help them in regards to how many medications they're taking, hopefully tailor their dosages or take some of those medications off depending on what we can do in that regards. And so it's really truly an honor to have you on with us today, Samantha. And really, what really struck me when I first heard about you and read about you was this concept that you have of FARMacy, F-A-R-M, pharmacy, and really helping patients in regards to medication loads and helping them have an overall healthier life. So thank you and welcome, Samantha.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm very excited to hear from you today. So before we get into anything else, can you just give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you came about with this concept of pharmacy? Why was that an interest of yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. So a bit of background on me. I am not a healthcare industry expert over the course of my career. I've actually spent the majority of my career in the beauty industry. So I really approach this problem from the patient's perspective. I have had gut health issues since I was about 11. They went pretty badly uncontrolled from 11 into my early 20s when I discovered the profound effect that eating the right foods was able to have on me and my body. And so throughout my 20s and into my early 30s, I spent a ton of time really researching and understanding food's impact on not only gut health issues, but on a variety of diet-related conditions that unfortunately affect about 60% of American adults. And so that is the lens with which I come to this conversation and the lens with which we created bitewell, the world's first digital food pharmacy with an F, as you so aptly noted.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about bitewell.
Absolutely. So bitewell is your one-stop shop for finding foods that help you to manage certain medical conditions. It really is akin from a business model perspective to a pharmacy, right? When you have a stomach ache, you walk into a pharmacy and you buy some Tums or you buy some Pepcid or you buy something to help you to solve that stomach ache. In the same way, you can enter bitewell's digital food pharmacy and find foods that help you to manage certain ailments or manage the symptoms around those ailments. So it really is quite similar. It's just that we're selling food instead of pharmaceuticals.
Wow, that is fascinating. So what brought you to this point where you are with the company today? I loved hearing about your journey as a child and where you are. How long has the company been around and how many patients, I will call them patients, or clients do you serve?
Yes. So we have been around for about 4 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
we tend to work with self-funded employers and commercial health plans who include bitewell as part of an overall benefits package. So in the
Oh,
same
wow.
way that you can get access to mental health care or to fertility care through your commercial health plan, you can also get access to food as medicine through your health plan when bitewell is available. So this year, we will serve about 3 million members.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's fantastic.
Thank you.
So this probably seems like a very basic question, but in your words, how does food really impact our health?
So many ways. in obvious and unobvious ways, right? So there are, of course, a certain set of conditions that we think of as diet related, right? Diabetes, for example,
Mhm.
heart disease, as an example, the gut health issues, IBS, IBD, Crohn's. All of these, I think, are a bit more obvious in the way that food impacts, right? In a
Right.
lot of cases, food and eating the wrong foods for your body can contribute to the development of these diseases, can make the symptoms worse, and can make these diseases get worse over time. But there are also a whole set of conditions that food impacts that we don't think about a lot, like anxiety or depression, as examples. Certain autoimmune conditions all are affected by food. And what's really fascinating to me, I say this all the time, is that um, food as medicine is not new. It's actually our oldest form of medicine. It's just that something has happened over the last 100 years where we've forgotten. We've forgotten that what we put into our body impacts how our body performs. And we are now remembering things that we had known long ago.
Sure. I couldn't agree with you more. And, we hear a lot about processed foods, and this is
Hmm.
really the root of a lot of issues. Can you talk a
Yes.
little bit about processed foods and how that impacts people?
Absolutely. So, this is one of my big topics right now that I spend a lot of time talking about. This idea, and I'm sure that a lot of listeners have seen this, of ultra processed foods making up a majority of Americans' diets, all over the world, but focusing specifically around the stats for Americans. Ultra processed foods um, make up about 50% of the average American adult's diet, and unfortunately, about 70% of the average American child's diet.
Oh, wow.
70%. It's wild.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
what's challenging here, um, when we start to look at the studies around ultra processed foods' effects on the body, is that there is not a great consistent definition of what an ultra processed food is. We can all imagine there are things that are very clear, right? Like Doritos, Lunchables, these things that we know inherently are ultra processed foods. But in the existing definition of ultra processed foods, things like frozen strawberries could be considered an ultra processed food.
Mm.
And there's certainly a very big difference in health impact between consuming frozen strawberries versus consuming Lunchables. And so the first thing that we need to do to really understand and change the impact of bad ultra processed foods or negative ultra processed foods in our bodies is to define them appropriately. Um, and then we can take a better look at all of the studies that are starting to come out and understand ultra processed foods' impact on the body when we put it through the right lens of definition.
Yeah, wow. You put it that way, and it hits home for me, especially having 3 children, and so trying to find those healthy snacks can be tough sometimes, sure. So, you talked a little bit about foods and how they can affect various diseases. Um, can you give us an example maybe of one that we're not familiar with? So maybe you mentioned autoimmune diseases.
Mhm.
What might be some foods that would affect autoimmune diseases?
Um, Autoimmune diseases are probably the trickiest one because different people have different triggers. So it really depends on how your body is reacting to that condition and what your individual triggers are. And once you figure those out, then you can begin to avoid those foods. I think a perhaps a more straightforward one to consider is thinking about food's impact on something like anxiety,
Sure.
right? What is likely obvious is caffeine intake and its impact on anxiety. That's probably obvious to many of us. What may not be obvious is um, added sugar and added sugar's impact on anxiety, or red dye number four and red dye number four's impact on anxiety. And many studies are beginning to come out about individual ingredients or food types and their impact on diseases that we wouldn't otherwise think of as diet related.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And I know that, it's really hard to get people to change their habits. And
hmm
so for us to talk about this, it might seem like a huge change for some people in regards to how they eat every day. So could we maybe provide some insight on how you can start just at a smaller level or take it a little bit at a step at a time? What would be your recommendation?
Absolutely. So when we start working with our members and when our members join us for the first time on the pharmacy, we call it onboarding. When they onboard with us, we have them tell us about foods they love, foods they hate, and to choose a non-negotiable. Like, yes, I want to feel better, but I'm never going to give up pizza, as an example. And so we can take that starting point and say, okay, foods you love, let's start there. How can we find a slightly healthier alternative or a slightly better swap for a food that you already love? Foods
Mhm.
you hate, great. We're going to ignore those. If you don't like salmon, even if salmon is the healthiest thing for you, I am not going to try to get you to eat it because that is not going to be helpful to you. We want to make sure that food is both fueling and healthful, but also pleasurable. So, foods you hate, we're going to avoid those. And then your non negotiables, my recommendation is for the when you're getting started, leave those alone. Like, allow yourself to have a slice of pizza every once in a while if that's your non-negotiable. And then over time, you can think about those in the same way that you think about the foods that you love and say, okay, is there a healthier alternative to this slice of pizza? Or can I make it a little bit more helpful for me? Maybe instead of, picking it up from the slice joint down the street, I'm going to make my own pizza so that I can control the ingredients that are going into the crust. Maybe I'll try a sourdough crust pizza. Maybe I will put a little bit less cheese on the pizza. Maybe I'll put a higher quality olive oil on the pizza. And so there are a lot of, small levers that you can tweak in your day-to-day life that take foods that you already love and enjoy and just make them a little bit better for you. What I think is really fascinating about this methodology is that although the changes don't feel big week on week, if you take a look back month over month or year over year, you'll see how much change you really have made.
That that's excellent. I really truly believe in meeting people where they are, and motivation can be drained if they feel like I just can't make
Yep.
these big steps. So I love that. That's great. And so along those same lines, and I will say pharmacists say this all the time as well, that you sometimes feel uncomfortable talking to people about diets and the changes they need to make. So do you have recommendations maybe for the pharmacists who are out there listening? How do you speak with patients about this, or how do you approach the situation with them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll answer it in a few ways. The first is that diet has become a bad word.
It's a four-letter
In
word, right?
It's a four-letter word. Diet is a four-letter word.
Right, right.
And so there are other words that we can use and other ways that we can approach conversations about eating.
Mhm.
What I have found to be one really easy way in is to ask someone, what do you eat on a day-to-day basis? What do you like to eat? What do you enjoy? And get people to start talking about what they enjoy. And then ask them, okay, talk to me about how your body feels after you eat different foods. Do you notice differences when you eat one type of food versus another? Or does your body generally feel good no matter what you eat? If you have the conversation in this way, you begin to understand and be able to pick up on, and the person who's speaking to you, the patient who's speaking to you, is able to reflect on in a way that doesn't feel accusatory their eating patterns and dietary behaviors, and to come to their own conclusions about foods that are working and not working for them. And then once you're in this headspace of shared understanding about what foods are working and not working for their body's needs, then you can have a more comfortable conversation around, okay, that's really interesting that you think that your body is not reacting well to gluten or to dairy. Have you considered trying an anti-inflammatory diet or trying a Mediterranean diet? And then that four-letter diet word doesn't get introduced into the conversation until far later and in a different context where it doesn't feel like diet is about calories or weight or these things that we have been trained to believe that diet is about. And
Right.
instead, it's about the nutritional composition of the food that you're putting in your body and how your body feels when you fuel it in that way.
Oh, that's excellent. And you brought up anti-inflammatory diet. I've heard this before as well, but can you tell our listeners sort of what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, inflammation is, as we all who are listening know, one of the leading indicators of disease, right? It's really interesting. The personal anecdote, my primary care provider had me do a big blood panel this year. And one of the markers that they tested for was cellular inflammation. And that's not something that I've ever been tested for before.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
when I asked him about why, he told me that it's really important to watch that cellular inflammation marker over time, because if you see it increasing, you can almost like preempt and figure out, what disease might that end up causing for you over time, and stop it before it starts. So we all know, and tons of research is coming out around the impact of inflammation on the body. What we don't necessarily think about is what foods are we eating that are causing inflammation in the body or exacerbating inflammation in the body. And so there is an entire nutrition and dietary protocol focused on reducing inflammatory foods in the body. Um, an example of an inflammatory food that is removed in the anti-inflammatory diet are nightshades. So tomatoes,
Mm.
eggplants, those types of foods, that for many of us, we would look at and say, that's a very healthy food. And that may be the case for many of us. But if we need to focus on reducing inflammation in the body, pulling nightshades out of the diet is a really simple way to start to do that.
That's fascinating. Thank you. So, we talk about what we should and shouldn't eat. Yet we still have patients, especially I will tell you, patients in our area, we are in an urban setting, who really struggle to find healthy foods in general, depending on where
Mhm.
they live. That can be a real challenge. So, what do you say to those patients? Can they manage based on where they live and what's available to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, I really like to remove the words should and shouldn't from the way that we talk about food. Because whether or not I should eat a cookie with rainbow sprinkles every once in a while, I'm going to eat a cookie with rainbow sprinkles every once in a while, because even though it's not necessarily the most nutrient dense option of fuel to put into my body, it makes me feel good emotionally, right? I enjoy it. I enjoy the taste of it. And so there is a world in which all foods fit in some way or another. The focus should be on the majority of your diet being food that is nutritionally rich and that is going to make you feel your best. Um, there are nutritionally rich foods available in most places, and in places that would be surprising to you. So, for example, if you live down the street, when I was in New York, I had a bodega down the street, and that was where I bought a lot of my day to day food. The hot dogs on the roller in the bodega, not necessarily nutrient dense,
Right.
but they did sell tons of dried beans. And those dried beans helped me to make nutrient dense meals. And so there are, surprisingly nutrient dense foods in lots of places. And then we really focus on ensuring that access to healthy food is available to everyone who has access to bitewell. And what that means is, through our network of vendor partners, we are able to ship healthy food to every zip code in the US.
Oh, wow.
And through our network of, yes, and through our network of health plan partners, if you're on a plan that covers access to bitewell, it's possible to get subsidized cost for those healthy foods. And so things that were perhaps cost prohibitive for you become possible.
Oh, wow. That's great to know. Thank you. And I like your example of it's really sometimes you just have to dig around a little bit in that store that's down the street or really be looking for these items. And it sounds like Bitewell helps in that regards, not only with shipping, but potentially providing them the information on what they should be looking for and that sort of thing based on them.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm certainly not saying that it's easy everywhere. There are a lot of places, unfortunately, in this country where it is still very challenging to
Mhm.
find, even a bag of dried beans or even a place to buy food that isn't fast
Right.
food.
Right.
And so in those parts of the country, I think making shipping and delivery of food more cost accessible helps us to get through some of those issues around healthy food access. Um, but really, this is a problem that is much bigger than me and much bigger than bitewell to solve. We really need to focus on expanding our food supply and our food retailers in areas of the country where you can't necessarily get access to fresh fruits and vegetables by walking down the street.
Right. I absolutely agree with that. Well, but it's a start. Where you are is certainly a start. And I think the more we talk about it and the more we realize how important food is, and I
Mhm.
strongly believe this, I teach our students about weight loss and weight loss medications, but a big part of that is how are the patients eating and really what are they putting into their bodies.
Yep.
And so I truly believe that we can do so much more, reduce medications, reduce costs of healthcare
Yeah.
overall. And so we just have to put that money forward in the first place so that we can, really cut down on the cost, because I will tell you, healthcare costs just continue to skyrocket and have to
Yeah.
find ways to improve that.
Yep.
Um,
Should we talk about that? Should we talk about the weight loss drugs that are, I'm certain, on everyone's mind when we start talking about food as medicine? Um,
we
do you
certainly
do you think
can.
that's useful? Yeah, I think just a quick hit on it because
Sure.
it's on everyone's mind.
It is,
Um,
and it's available everywhere.
yes.
Semaglutide, particularly. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. And becoming more available, and I expect over the next several years becoming less cost prohibitive. And so
Mhm.
we should talk about what is required from a food perspective when a patient goes on those medications. Um, I think some of the negative side effects that we are hearing about with regard to those medication come from not changing dietary patterns and behaviors when you go on the medication. And so while you are reducing your caloric intake, you're not adjusting to a more nutrient dense diet. And so people are malnourished, people are fainting, people are having, blood glucose issues. Um, and so I think, now more than ever, it is really important for our pharmacists to understand um, how to talk to people about food.
Mhm.
Because if we're going to have a large portion of the population on weight loss drugs and medications, then we need to be properly educating people about how to feed themselves and fuel themselves while they're on those medications and as they come off of them.
That is an excellent point, and I'm so glad you talked about that, because you're absolutely right. We have patients who have cut down calories tremendously,
Yep.
but what kind of calories are they getting? Are they getting enough of what they need? And that's the
Yeah.
biggest issue. And then on these medications also, we have patients with nausea and vomiting that occurs from
Yes.
from them as well. And partly it could be some of the foods that they're eating, but the medication we know certainly can contribute to that. So if that's the
Yes.
case, making sure that they're getting those foods that they need when they're able to eat, I think is so extremely important. You're absolutely right.
Yep,
Yeah.
and we really do need to arm. I was chatting with someone at the American Diabetes Association recently, and she shared something with me that I did not know. That there is a training program that puts within a pharmacist's scope the ability to talk to a person with diabetes about diet and about food. They're not going to go into kind of the level of detail of a nutritionist or a dietitian, but there is food conversation within a pharmacist's scope. And
Absolutely.
I think that is so critical that we are arming our pharmacists with the knowledge that they need to have real good conversations about food. Um, to me, and one of the reasons why we call Bitewell a food pharmacy is because to me, the pharmacy is really the center of community medicine because it's a place where you can go in and you can ask questions about medications you're taking or about symptoms you're having, and it's a very accessible place for people. And so, how can we use that accessibility and the feeling that the pharmacy is at the center of the community to share information about food and nutrition.
Absolutely. And many pharmacies are located within a grocery store. It's like the
Yep,
perfect place to be really talking to the patients and explaining,
exactly.
hey, this is where these are the foods that you should be looking
Yep.
to be purchasing. Oh, this is great. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Well, you talked a lot about then pharmacists, how they can really specifically help. That was one of my questions in regards to
Yeah.
pharmacy. And, I hope we've opened up the eyes of a lot of people who are here listening to really understand that they are a big part of this as well and can really help patients. Um, Thank you so much for joining our podcast today. I really feel like you're trying to leave the world a little bit healthier, and we need more people like you in this world. So thank you for that. Do you have anything else you want to leave us with today?
The only thing I'll leave you with is that if there's something that we can do to be helpful, if you're listening and you either want to learn more about food as medicine or want to learn more about how you can bring this into your pharmacy practice, please do reach out to us. Our website is bitewell.com, bitewell.com. And if you reach out to us there, a member of my team will get back to you. And we really are here to help to make the world a healthier place than the world we entered. So thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I'll include that in our show notes as well.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. And to all of our listeners, thank you for listening. We really hope you enjoyed today. I really did. Make sure that you subscribe to both our YouTube channel as well as the podcast. And take care, everyone. Live a healthier life.